Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the RV Connects podcast. This week, we're taking you all the way to the east coast of Canada, where we share our summer trip through Prince Edward Island. Think red sand beaches, seafood, winding coastal drives, a few surprises along the way. So, whether you're planning your first trek out east or just daydreaming about that island vibe, we've got stories and tips to help you make the most of it. So, grab your favorite road trip snack and let's dive in to our PEI adventure. But of course, as always, we need to talk about our amazing, incredible, very supportive show sponsors for season 5, and that is Niagara Trailers. Of course, this episode and all of the other ones this season are brought to you by Niagara Trailers. We are in September. We know that the end of RVing season is rolling in for everybody, probably a lot sooner here in Ontario than we would like. And that sort of singles in the end of camping season, but this is actually one of the best times to visit Niagara Trailers. So let's talk about why. Fall is when you can really take your time shopping. The summer crowds have eased off. The lot is still full of incredible options, though, from couples trailers or bunkhouse models or that unit that you want to upgrade to because this camping season just seemed a little bit maybe too small for you. Or you just want to look at what next model years are going to bring. That's when you take it to Niagara Trailers with pre-orders and end of season deals that mean you can lock in the exact unit you want. And here's the thing. We know best camping memories don't just happen in July and August. Some of the most underrated weekends are those crisp fall mornings with a hot coffee in your hand and no bugs in sight. And come winter, it's the perfect time to plan and dream about where your RV will take you next. So don't think of September as the end. Think of it as the beginning of your next adventure. Head down to Niagara Trailers, where they've been helping Canadian families hit the road since 1972.
And tell them that the RV Canuck sent you.
Thanks, Dan.
Nailed it.
So speaking of crisp fall mornings, I would say this morning was probably one of those for us. We are coming to you live. If you are watching us on video, you can literally see that we are in our trailer. If you are just listening to us on audio, first of all, apologies if the quality is a little sketch. We have our portable mics on us and we'll get back into the studio with some better quality soon. But we are at one of our favorite provincial parks this weekend, Inverhuron Provincial Park on Lake Huron. And tell the folks why we're here.
We're here for our 23rd wedding anniversary. And so tomorrow's a Sunday. Hopefully it's Sunday wherever you are too. Who knows what day of the week you're listening to this, but that's the actual day of our anniversary. So we'll wake up in the trailer on the day that we were married.
23 long years ago.
I was going to say 23 lovely years.
Okay, we'll go through that. Our children are not with us. They are busy working and hockey practice and et cetera. So we're kind of getting into this like just couples. We've had a couple couples trips this year.
Well, there was a scare that they were going to come this weekend. Not really a scare. We would have been really happy if they came. I think like we're happy to be away by ourselves, but a little bit secretly disappointed that they couldn't make it work.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit upset with us that
we're here.
That we're here because this is their favorite park too.
Yeah, this is a place that's very, very special to our family. Dan's second home growing up, as he likes to say.
Yes, I described it this morning at breakfast as my backup hometown.
Which is true. And then we talked about all the street cred. Long story short, his grandma was the president of the Ratepayers Association here in the early 90s?
Early 90s, yeah.
So you've got street cred, honey, don't worry. But we're actually not here to talk about Inverhuron. We're here to talk about PEI. So it's been a few weeks since we talked about our trip out east, and I think we touched on it on our episode where we talked about harvest hosts. And so we thought we would just go through and break down the trip. We've talked a little bit about Alma, New Brunswick and the Bay of Fundy, and we've talked about harvest hosts, but we're going to talk specifically just about our experience in PEI this summer in July. It was 3 days, which I think is an important number, but we'll talk about that later when we kind of get into it. But I know you wanted to start with the Confederation Bridge, taking the bridge over.
So I was really excited to take the bridge. And I think somehow in my mind, I thought this was going to be like driving all the little bridges that take you down to Key West and big scenic views. And the bridge is impressive, but it's not Key West. And I I think it's a safe bridge, which I raise because sometimes you go across those big bridges and you're worried about wind and getting blown around, and I'm sure they get their fair share of storms. Certainly felt very safe, but I don't think you get the same views or the same like vibe on this bridge that you do on, say a bridge in Key West, for example.
Yeah. So I drove across, and Dan had his camera out because he was really excited to take the video. But the walls on the side of the bridge are pretty, they're like mid window height, like they're very tall. So you really don't get a huge view,
Yeah,
which wind wasn't a problem. So it was like a breeze to drive over. But yeah, you don't really kind of get those sweeping vistas that we're used to with the 7 Mile Bridge, as Dan mentioned in Key West.
and I think they probably had to build this with a different kind of storm in mind, like ice storms and
Mm-hmm.
ice flows underneath the bridge. And I know they get hurricanes in Florida and all, but I think like they've had to engineer something different. So like the nerdy side of me did look at like how this thing's built, but
Mm-hmm.
no, but it was still interesting, and that kind of got us onto the island.
So cost. So the bridge is a toll bridge. We have talked about this before. The episode where before we left, we talked about the cost of kind of getting on and off the island. So you technically you pay to get off the island, not to get on the island from the bridge, but the fee that they charge you to get off the island is the round trip fee. So if you enter and leave via the bridge, you're paying on your way back out, but you're paying for the round trip cost. So we drove to PEI on the bridge, so we did not pay to get on, and we chose to leave via ferry. And of course, there was a cost for the ferry.
Yeah, so I think it was good to have done both of them. They just to mix up the trip and do a bit of a loop. I would recommend that for anybody because the ferry, I think we'll talk about it at the end, but the ferry was super smooth
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about the island itself. So PEI is not a large island. It's quite small. However, there's a lot of different things to see, and they all seem to be kind of on the other outer edges of the island at all different points. So we decided to stay sort of as close to the middle of PEI as we can. And if you're sort of looking at the map, PEI is almost like it looks like a little bit of a crescent, and so we chose to stay kind of in the northernmost point, kind of in the middle of the island, if you were looking at a map from left to right. So we chose to stay just outside Cavendish at Cabot Beach Provincial Park, which was right on the water. We had beautiful water views from our site. One thing I will say about PEI provincial parks, dirt cheap compared to Ontario, and you get, I guess, more bang for your buck in terms of the amenities at the campsite. So traditionally speaking, at most provincial parks, you're gonna have electric sites, and you're gonna fill up at the freshwater station. Selkirk has water, but that's like an anomaly. Like it's very rare at a provincial park in Ontario that you would find water also at your site. And most of the provincial parks in PEI seem to have your choice of, unserviced, electric only, or full service sites, which they called like two-way and three-way. So we booked a three-way site at the provincial park. It was $48 a night. And I think, what are we at in Ontario now? Like $69, $67, somewhere around there, just for an electric site. So I was very impressed at the value for money.
Yeah, value for money. The sites, there are a few private sites, a few sites in the woods, but largely I think many of the sites, especially on the whole trip, but at this place as well, were like wide open, kind of a grid, almost in a field. And you might not be favorable to that. The advantage to that is even if you weren't at the water's edge, you had a view of the water,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is good. And it's just a function of the landscape and the geography of PEI more than anything. It wasn't like they came in and clear cut the thing to put in lots of campsites. It still had a good ambiance, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's sort of the natural vista that you would expect kind of at a cliff's edge
Yeah.
on the water, right? So beautiful views, beautiful sunset, really nice place to stay. Nice beach, very large beach.
Beach is actually really cool. So there's a bit of a green space park area there. So if you had kids, you needed to let them burn off some energy, that would be good. As you get down to the beach, there's this like rubber mat, and it's wide. And I think what it's there for is to make it easy if you have like a mobility device like a wheelchair or
Accessibility mat, yeah.
an accessibility Yeah, it's an accessibility map, but it's there if you have a wheelchair or a walker or maybe even a wagon or a stroller. It gets you down to the beach. Like, don't get me wrong, it doesn't get you to the water's edge. It probably takes the hardest part of the trip and gets you close to the water's edge. You would still have to, I think, dismount your device and if you wanted to get into the water. But I think that's a really neat touch that really just kind of blends itself into the landscape.
Hmm. Yeah, there was a neat plaque there as well that we looked at when we were riding our bikes around. So there was like some kind of famous shipwreck there, and like just a really storied area of the province, and really neat. Very, I would say like the nearest town was like 15 minutes away. So you're generally, in rural PEI,
Mhm.
which is nice. It was beautiful. It was quiet.
Yeah, you're right near a wharf, so there's a government wharf with a bunch of different fishing boats down there, and I think that's one of the things of PEI. It felt like you were never more than 10 or 15 minutes away from a little wharf or a little stand, and there would be too many for us to include in this podcast of where we stopped, but
Hmm.
more than once we just kind of pulled over and took a picture and poked around and looked and stretched your legs, and it was kind of cool that way.
One of the things that I really liked about this park, and I meant to pull it because I think I saved it, and I hope they never ever change it, was the map to our campsite that looked like somebody drew it in like 1984, and it has just been photocopied since then. It's adorable. It's a hand drawn map of the campground to get you to your site, which is very different from what we're used to seeing. But I actually loved it. It was like, this is we're a laid back people. We'll hand draw the map at the provincial park and just show you how to get to your site, and it was perfect.
Yeah, even like the check-in process was pretty laid back. Like there wasn't a lot of room for big rigs, but it wasn't jammed up either. You just kind of go with the flow and they'll tell you how to get to your site. Washrooms, I don't think they've changed since when the map was printed. That being said, in terms of cleanliness, I'll give them a 10 out of 10. The inside is probably the original building to like the 1990s, but it was completely painted super clean. Functionality, I'll give them an 8 out of 10 only because like I think things like the faucet should be upgraded where you're going to have a shower, but I'm kind of nitpicking. All of that to say, like, we're 100 feet from a washroom right now. One of them's missing the faucet and the other faucet isn't screwed down. So they are doing pretty good. But
Hmm.
like, point of all this is like washrooms are good if you're going to use the washroom and not use the one inside your trailer.
Hmm. So for us, I would say location was probably like 9 out of 10. I think the only thing that would have made it better for the way we were traveling and what we were doing is we were there to sightsee, so we were always on the move, would to be to have a park or a place to stay maybe a little further south towards like the dead center of the province. Again, we didn't pre-plan this, right? Like we booked all of these sites a week and a half, 2 weeks out. So we got what we could get. And I'm super happy with the location because if we're going kind of from Tignish on the west side to like East Point on the right side of the province, or on the east side of the province, you're about an hour to an hour and a half both ways. So for us to get up, grab some breakfast, get in the truck, and go do sightseeing, we could basically kind of circle the province in a number of hours. So location wise, I was super happy with it.
Yeah, and our daughter, she went on a trip earlier in the summer and they stayed just off the bridge at a KOA and they had a great time. I think the trade off to your comment is like we're right on the water
Mm-hmm.
beside a meadow. You could look out and you would see a fishing trawler go by or different boats. So there's a bit of a trade off. And I
Mm-hmm.
think to be on the water was good, but you're never really far from anything, which I think is the point of it. And there's not a traffic jam to be had.
Yeah. So timings, we were on the province or on the island of PEI for 3 nights. We stayed 2 nights at Cabot Beach Provincial Park, and then we stayed the third night, as you know, if you listen to us, at Double Hill Cidery. That was one of our Harvest Host stays directly before getting on the ferry. Why I mention that is, with 2 nights, we really had to really just go around and do a lot of sightseeing. I think timing wise for me, I feel like probably 5 nights would be perfect on PEI. I feel like we were a little bit rushed. There was a few things that we wanted to see that we didn't get to see. But again, the whole point of this trip was basically to take note of where you wanted to go back and spend some time. But I think if we had an extra night, like just at Cabot Beach, we probably would have been able to check off most of what we had, and then adding a fourth or fifth night elsewhere would get you to the rest of the province.
Yeah, I think if you were going to stay longer in the province, it would be about staying and enjoying just being on the beach
Mm-hmm.
and going for swims and just the nature aspect of it, as opposed to like trying to check off more things to see.
Yeah.
I think you could go for that 4 or 5 day duration that you talk about and see everything, not be rushed, but I think to stay longer than that would just be
Hmm.
to just chill out, which is okay too.
Yeah. Which maybe brings us to the next point is that generally speaking, when we're traveling and we don't have a lot of nights in a place, we will go ahead and hook up our trailer and say, oh, well, we'll just see X, Y, or Z because it's along the way from this spot to the next spot. I would say we ran into a situation where if we had attempted to do that with our trailer on PEI, we would have been in dire circumstances. So we went one morning. It was our first stop of the day. We went to a lighthouse that I wanted to see, which was right near the campground. It was called Cape Tryon Lighthouse. Beautiful vista, right on the edge of a cliff. It's not like a lighthouse that has like a museum or anything that you can visit. You can't go up inside it, but the vistas were absolutely stunning. And it felt like you were on the edge of the world. There was nobody around, like no other buildings that you could see. Beautiful. And when you look at the maps, it just, well, you go up this road, you take a left, you take another left, and the lighthouse is at the end of the road. Well, we found out pretty quick, and we have a 4-wheel drive pickup truck, that the road is very like just red PEI dirt, very lots of ruts, lots of potholes. I would say if it was wet at all, if it was raining, like even we might have had trouble traversing this road in. We did see a couple of other cars, a couple of other, what would you call them, like the 15-seater like passenger vans. They struggled a little bit getting down the road. You can definitely do it in dry weather, and I definitely recommend going. Like, don't dissuade you. The road is passable. But if we had hooked up our trailer and thought, oh, well, we'll just scoot down this road, it wasn't sort of evident until after you had turned that corner that this would not be a road that you could travel, because it
Yeah.
was like also narrow, one vehicle width.
Yeah, so I think the lesson is, if there's a few things you want to see along the way, doing a little bit of route planning the day of would be good, to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that the road you're going down is like the kind of road that you're expecting. You're not going to get a class A motorhome to this place, even
Mm-hmm.
though the road might suggest it on a map. You might get a smaller class C to it, as long as it's not raining and not washed out. But keep in mind, it was kind of a one and a half lane road at the best, which meant if you met somebody, you were both going to have to shift right to let the other fella pass. So doing a little bit of route reconnaissance in advance would be well advised, if you're going to swing off to that little thing by the side of the road that's not kind of staffed as an official attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Although it is an official attraction, there's just
Mm-hmm.
nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
I think as well, we followed Google, and we all hear the, so and so followed Google and drove their boat down the boat launch into the harbor. We didn't do that. We missed a turn. Google rerouted us, and it took us down a similar kind of road, which was really kind of the back lane to a bunch of cottages, which was interesting in and of itself. But like, just beware the Google. I think
Well, these
I
were
think
official roads with street signs. So, like, I think it was just the caliber of road in that area. This is a separate, this was like on our way back that day. Like,
yeah.
so separate situation, separate area of the province. And so, yes, there's street signs, but it's very ruddy. Again, if we had had the trailer on, we would have been euchred.
We would have been having to like just pause and take 5 minutes to figure another way to where we were going.
Pause and take 5 minutes for somebody to stop yelling is what Dan is really saying.
23 lovely years.
Yeah. Um, okay. Well, let's talk about, okay, so some of that seems negative. Beautiful province, just if you're going to be doing sightseeing, you're going to be doing it in your vehicle, like not necessarily with your trailer in tow. And I think you're going to enjoy it more that way anyway. And the province is small enough, is the point we're making, that you can start in wherever you're staying, do a big loop, come back. And like the next day, you could do a loop in the other direction and come back. And it's not overly, like, you're not going to be on the road for 6 or 7 hours. Like, you could do a loop in 3 hours and be back and see some things.
But it is adventurous and kind of makes you feel like an explorer to go down these roads. So that's super cool. The fact that you maybe don't travel around with your trailer to see some of the stuff is also good, because there's so much stuff that just pops up. You're like, hey, I want to take a picture here. I just want to pull in there and have a look at this little shop. That makes it so easy to do if you can just do that without
Mm-hmm.
having, a big rig with you.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of it's not unique to Prince Edward Island, but I think they have more of that than other places we've been to.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about food, because Prince Edward Island has great food. If you love seafood, obviously, it's going to be very, very fresh. And, we had some really unique dishes Well, like let's talk about the Handpie Company because there's this place in PEI called the Handpie Company, and they're almost like I would call what are those little
Like a pizza pocket.
I was gonna say I'm not going to say pizza pocket because that makes me sound like a yokel. I'm thinking more of like Cornish pasties. Thank you. They're like, but yes, a pizza pocket. But inside, they're very savory. There's like taco flavored one. There's a curry flavored one. And the Hand Pie Company is in PEI, and they make these amazing. Like they're probably like 2 pounds a piece. These things that you cook in the oven, and they're so delicious. And we brought a few home in the freezer, but highly recommend. We also stopped at this really cute place called Sunny's Dairy Bar, and it's like a ice cream place that's kind of like a round shack, kind of a painted bright yellow. It was near those warplane, what was it like,
It was a
open air
open
museum
air museum. Yeah.
with military planes, and right around the corner from that was Sunny's, and they had excellent ice cream, a lot of flavors. And then we had, of course, lobster rolls. You cannot go to PEI and not have lobster rolls. And we chose Richard's, which apparently is the best place in PEI to get lobster rolls. There are 2 locations of Richard's. We went to the one in Victoria by the Sea. I am so, so glad that we did, but maybe you can talk about the vibe, the setup of the restaurant.
So the restaurant, you're gonna kind of step onto like a patio or a deck, really. Melina went and placed the order for a couple of local brews and the lobster rolls, and then I went to go find a spot for us to sit. This is a little bit different in that there's long tables, really kind of bigger than a picnic table, stools, but you don't really just sit by yourself. If there's a long table that sits 8 and there's 4 people at one end, you just kind of jump on the other end, and it's almost
Communal seating.
communal kind of seating, which is neat because you never know who you're going to talk to or who you're going to bump into. And I think maybe that, I don't know that that's why they designed it that way, but I certainly know that it was happening at more than just our table.
Yeah, I know we talked about this before, but this is where we actually met people from like 20 minutes away from us as well in PEI. They live in Guelph, just around the corner of us. So I actually like that idea where you just kind of, you find a spot, you start chatting with the people next to you, and you end up meeting some really neat people.
Yeah, so I think it was really good. I think we would recommend going to that place, whether you're going to have a lobster roll or something else.
Yeah, but Victoria by the Sea, beautiful, really, really historic, village, hamlet. Like it's not even a village. Like they have a few stores, a lighthouse that you can walk up, a decommissioned lighthouse that you can walk up. They have a beautiful little theater where they have live plays. Like it reminds me of probably what like Niagara on the Lake, if you're familiar with Ontario, was probably 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In that it was, very busy with tourists, but very small, very quaint. It's the type of place that is completely dead in the winter. Like I think we saw a plaque that said how many locals live there, and it's like 200 people live there year round. But what a stunning place to walk around.
Yeah, there's a little wharf, a couple of other restaurants you could check out, independent shops. There's no real chain shops, so everything is unique. The buildings themselves are historic. Parking was really easy. We parked like maybe 2 blocks from downtown at a public parking lot, and we're not going to give you directions here because if you don't find it when you drive in, just drive around the block and you'll find it. This place is not that big. I think I'd probably give the town maybe like 2-3 hours, budget 2 or 3 hours to see everything, including stopping for a bit of food and a sit down and some pictures. And I think that's about the right amount of time. I remember there was a couple of kids jumping off the wharf into the water as teenagers do, and you took pictures for them because they were trying to
do backflips,
backflips and review their technique. So that's the flavor of the town. It's not super packed. So if you're thinking like Niagara on the Lake or Elora these days, it's not super packed.
Mm-hmm.
There's enough to have an ambiance, enough to meet people that live 20 hours away and sit at your table to have a lobster roll, but you're not going to be bumping into people on the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I really, that was probably one of the highlights of the trip for me, was to go there. I thought it was really great.
And there was a cool little museum and another lighthouse to check out. Feels like maybe if you're listening to the podcast, we check out a lot of lighthouses. I don't know why that is, but I don't think
because I love lighthouses.
Well, you love lighthouses, but I don't think we like sit down and plan out where all the lighthouses are. We just kind of gravitate towards them.
I maybe sat down and looked at the map because I actually wanted to hit as many lighthouses as we could on that trip. And I'm sad because there was 2 that we didn't get to. One was Point Prim Lighthouse, and the other one was East Point Lighthouse. But we did go to West Point Lighthouse, and that was after going to Victoria by the Sea. This is all in one day. We drove over to West Point Lighthouse.
Yeah, we drove over there. We paid to get in, and we took. There's kind of like a self-guided tour
Mm-hmm.
of this museum of this lighthouse,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to climb up several flights of stairs, and it explains the history of the area, and it gives you like a super great panoramic view if you're going to take pictures. We were there at the end of the day, I think it was.
Yeah, it was about 6 o'clock, which was amazing because it was kind of that golden hour, perfect time to get photos. We were running late because we did stop to see the planes, and then we got ice cream, and then we thought, okay, well, this museum it's gonna be closed by the time we get there, but I think it was open into the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got there towards the end of the day. Beautiful, cool, nighttime, like just the vibe was perfect, and there's an inn there as well. And yeah, I think the time of day, I'm actually glad that we did it later because we were the only people in the museum at that time. And so we're used to kind of circular staircases, that spiral staircases that go up lighthouses. This one had a series of ladders, which was like, my legs were shaking going up to the very top because they're very narrow. They're open string. So it's not for the faint of heart. If you don't love heights, if you don't love climbing like ladders effectively, you might have a little bit of trouble, but I highly recommend that you do, even if you're a little bit scared, because the view at the top is just stunning.
It's not as bad as the Temagami Fire Tower
No.
or the Brock Monument
Yeah.
in Niagara Falls if you've done any of those. So I think that was okay. But it was really interesting. It's interesting to walk through it and learn the history. It was also interesting to just kind of walk down the hallway and know that somebody's hotel in room was just right off the hallway, and I can only imagine what it must be like when it's there after hours and you're just the guest. That might be an interesting experience too.
Yeah. So actually, in the lighthouse, there's like the keeper's room, and there was another room that they're like, if the door is closed, they have a sign on it that says, if this door is closed, that means there's a guest staying in it. But other than that, the doors are open and you can see those rooms as well. So I found that kind of neat. Yeah, that you could rent that.
And even once you're done all of that, you go back to the parking lot. We still walk down to the beach because you're
Mm-hmm.
right on the water. And I think that's the thing about Princess Edward Island is you're never far from the water ever,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And so you're not only do you get to see something cool, you get to stretch your legs and be active and
Yeah.
before you move on to the next thing, which I think isn't really kind of a nice touch.
Yeah. And right beside West Point Lighthouse, there's Cedar Dunes Provincial Park. So that was the other provincial park we were looking at. But because it's so far to the west of the island, we decided not to stay there. They did have availability. We wanted to be more central. But what a gorgeous park. So you're on the other side of the island, so a different vantage point, from a water view standpoint. But Dan had said when we drove by, you were like, oh man, if I were just coming here to like sit on the beach for a week, like this seems like the perfect park.
I think it would be. And keep in mind, I'm not giving an official park review here. I'm going from what I saw in the passenger seat and at the top of the lighthouse, but it was a bit of a more open style park, but you could just tell from the vibe of it that people were barbecuing and kids were playing frisbee and you're near the beach if you just want to take your book and go down and read your book all afternoon. So I think it would be really good from that aspect, that I would definitely want us to check that out later in the future.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And I guess to close off, I would say really there's a couple of things we didn't see that we had planned on seeing. One was the Canadian Potato Museum, which I understand is actually very interesting, but it was closed, and that's sort of closer to West Point Lighthouse, like that side of the island. But it's okay. Like I was okay missing that because we just decided, we're like, oh, there's a cool antique shop, let's pull over and look. So we kind of planned a few things, but then left the rest of the day open to just kind of see what we could see, and I actually preferred that. So but unfortunately we'll have to go back and do that one again. The other one was Charlottetown. So our initial plan was to see Charlottetown, spend a little bit of time there because that was the day we were leaving Cabot Beach and we were going to Double Hill Cidery. But we had all day and it was only about a 2 hour drive. So originally we thought, okay, well, let's see if we can find somewhere good to park the trailer. From the satellite views, like I know they have like a racetrack and all kinds of stuff, but there was a lot of construction, and so we thought, well, maybe we could park at like a Walmart and we'll take like an Uber or a Lyft. into Charlottetown and just leave the trailer parked, somewhere where there's like a large parking lot that's close enough to downtown that we could take an Uber or Lyft, only to find out that Uber or Lyft doesn't operate in the East Coast. They have their own rideshare app, which why I don't know, but it's called Carry or Kari. But they didn't operate in PEI yet, but they operate in other provinces. So it was like that or a taxi. And then by the time we got to Walmart and got some provisions, we thought, you know what? For the couple of hours that we would get in town, like we would probably rather prefer to just go back and spend more time because Charlottetown is very historic. There's a lot of museums there. You would probably want to spend a whole day there. So instead, what we did was we found a very secluded part of the parking lot, which happened to be right beside a retaining wall, and like rolled out our awning a little bit, made some beautiful sandwiches, and we had a really nice, relaxing lunch in a parking lot. It was actually probably nice to just sit down because we had been traveling pretty hard by that point, but I actually really enjoyed that. And then we got to the cidery, with a couple hours before they closed and just had a more relaxing day. So,
yeah, we already had to be at the Walmart anyways because we needed to stock up on groceries. There's a couple items we needed to pick up that we were, so we had to be there anyways is the point of it. So don't think we just stopped in a parking lot for no particular reason. We had to be there anyways. I think it's not saying you shouldn't go to Charlottetown. It just wasn't the right decision for us that day.
Yeah, for sure. So again, with these types of travels, right? We've only got a couple of weeks. We have, vacations from work and then we have to get back home. So a lot of these trips at this stage in our life are like, what do we want to go and see? What do we want to make note of for, when we can go back when we have more time? And so I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the 3 days we spent there. Like I said, though, I think 5 would be optimal. If you had 5 days to explore, you would probably see most of what you wanted to see on PEI, if not all of it. But I did enjoy coming by bridge, leaving by ferry. I know you gave an overview of the ferry on our last episode, but maybe just give like that 30-second review.
So it was really easy. We took the first sailing of the morning. I think it was about 8 o'clock, give or take. If you're listening to this podcast, go look up their schedule because it's going to change anyways. Point being, we took the first sailing in the morning. It was July. It was not busy. We had pre-booked. Check-in took like 2 minutes tops. You pull up to a booth, the lady makes sure you've got a reservation. She reminds you to turn off your propane tanks, tells you to pull up part way. You go park where she says to park, and then you wait. Really, they said, I think, was it be there half an hour early?
Yeah.
We got there 40 minutes early and we would have been fine. There's a bit of a terminal there with a washroom inside it. There's a kind of a seating area, almost like a really super small it's not an airport lounge, but think super small airport lounge type setup, but nothing was open in it. And then somebody told us to pull up a few more feet and then we were on the ferry. Ferry was really interesting. So there was I remember this massive crane in front of us. I don't know. I just like this kind of stuff, the way people like railroads. We had breakfast on the ferry. We got eggs. I felt a little bad. They said, what do you want? I said, we'll have the eggs and bacon, eggs over easy. I didn't realize the eggs are actually only supposed to come one way. And so we kind of held up the line, which I feel bad about. So my apologies to everybody. Pet friendly, though. I think that's an important thing to mention. There's a lot of spots there for your pet to get out and stretch and drink some water, and you
pet
can
relief areas.
Pet relief area. You can. This is not a tropical cruise. Don't get me wrong, but there are some areas to go outside and take pictures and get some fresh air. And you're not far from the shore. You're always going to see land, really. And it was
the crossing was only about an hour and a half.
Yeah, hour and a half. Yeah. And it's super easy on and off. Drive on, drive off. No backing up. So I would highly recommend it, at least one way.
Yeah. I mean, the benefit of getting there early is that you're the first on, so you're the first off. But I would say the loading and unloading was so efficient that even if you were the last rig on, you would be offloaded pretty darn quick. Like they have it down to a science. So Northumberland Ferries staff and crew really, really know their stuff. It was really efficient.
Even just for making the booking, and I know I talked about this, so I won't belabor it. They're very friendly just making the booking. So I would recommend bridge on, ferry off, or ferry on, bridge off, because what that lets you do is a loop of the province. Now, I'm sure you can make a loop and still use both modes of transport, but I would recommend doing one of each.
And that's PEI, really.
That's PEI. I think the next stop is Nova Scotia, which has tons of adventures along the way as well.
Hmm.
Bit of a different flavor, which is cool, and we can kind of compare that to the rest of the trip, because remember we started by our daughter's dance competition in Ottawa, and then we did New Brunswick, and we've got to PEI, and so the next stop will be New Brunswick.
Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia. I my apologies.
23 wonderful years. Okay, well, that's it for this week, I guess. And we'll be back in a couple more weeks as we round down the season.
Yep. Enjoy your weeks and stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.